Climate change is something that most of us want to avoid. Unfortunately, our investments in our pension funds are often heavily vested in fossil fuel industries. But what can we do? We rely on our investments. I'm L.J. Meyer. Our guest today is Emilia Belliveau of 350 Vancouver. She's also a project specialist with the David Suzuki Foundation. She's here to tell us about fossil fuel divestment. Welcome to Access TV.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be invited.
How did you get involved with fossil fuel divestment?
I first got involved with fossil fuel divestment when I was doing my undergraduate degree. I had been passionate about climate change ever since I first learned about it when I was in high school, and I went to school to study environmental politics and climate politics. And when I was there, it was really overwhelming. The state of the world was a lot more dire than I had expected, and I found that the barriers to addressing climate change were actually the social and political and economic, not that we didn't have enough science. So I heard that students on campus were going to organize for fossil fuel divestment. I had no idea what it was, but it was really exciting to me, the fact that students were getting together to do something collectively, because as an individual, I didn't feel like I had a lot of power.
So what does fossil fuel divestment consist of?
Well, fossil fuel divestment is, in its most simple form, taking money that is in collected funds and stopping investing in the fossil fuel industry and reinvesting in alternatives. It's used as a tactic that allows us to scale up our impact by targeting institutions that have way larger pools of money than I as an individual, so endowment or pension funds.
So what can we do to divest?
Well, it starts by putting a freeze on any new fossil fuel investments, and then basically, there are a few different options. People take different approaches, but a common ask is to stop investing in the top 200 companies that have the largest assets of fossil fuel reserves, that those 200 companies alone, if those assets are extracted and burned, surpass our threshold of allowable burnable carbon by 5 times. People also choose to divest from fossil fuel refining companies and transport companies, or companies that are having a really negative impact on the ground in places where communities are resisting that type of extraction.
And what about like universities, pension funds? You do something along those lines as well?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the campaigns that I've worked on are students working together to get the university administrations to take their endowment funds and divest it on a large scale. And so often that also comes with an ask around transparency. A lot of the time we are parts of these public institutions like pensions, and we have a hard time being able to find out where our money is actually going. So it starts with figuring out where that money is, and then getting those institutions to remove it from the fossil fuel industry.
And so have you had any success?
Yeah, there's been a lot of success. Right now, over 1,000 institutions around the world have divested. There's over $8.7 trillion in asset value of organizations whose combined value is no longer in the fossil fuel industry. And there's been some really big wins, from the whole country of Ireland to the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund in Canada. We've had the Canadian Medical Association divest, along with organizations like mine, the David Suzuki Foundation. Yeah.
So why is divesting from fossil fuels so important?
The IPCC report that was released last December tells us we have less than 12 years to drastically transform our societies, our economies, our policies, in order to address climate change and keep it below 1.5 degrees. And that transformation necessitates that we do our finances differently. And so long as we're investing in the fossil fuel industry, then that's a barrier to making that transition, because we benefit, and so it actually delays our ability to tackle climate change.
Now, say I don't care at all about polar bears in the environment. Why should I want to divest?
Well, the fossil fuel industry also is a fairly volatile sector. So divestment is a way of avoiding risk in your portfolio, especially as new climate policies come into place that will further restrict carbon extraction. Divesting from fossil fuels is actually a really smart move. It avoids the risk of stranded assets when regulation comes in and limits those companies' ability to extract and burn that carbon.
So stranded assets, they're basically assets that the company, due to legislation to protect the world from disastrous climate change, have to leave in the ground. Is that right?
Yes. So right now, a company's assets are valued on the predication that all of their current reserves will be extracted and burned. And so if they can't do that, the value of that company is actually a lot less than its shareholders are benchmarking it at. So really, there's a huge risk involved with investing in these companies that may not be able to reap those profits.
So there's something else that you're involved in, and that's the Green New Deal. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, I'm one of the organizers with the youth-led group Our Time. And basically, the Green New Deal is both a policy portfolio and also an idea that in order to address climate change at the scale necessary, we need massive investments in public infrastructure, green technology, and that's sort of the flip side to this fossil fuel divestment campaign, is that we need to be reinvesting in building stronger, more sustainable communities that are resisting climate change and adapting to the climate change impacts that we're going to see here.
So how can people get involved? So say one of our viewers wants to help you out or volunteer, what can they do?
Yeah, 350 Vancouver meets monthly. So we have an email and a Facebook page and a website. So we're always open to having new volunteers join us. We also regularly host public events that you can look for. And another thing I would say is it's really important to get out in your own community and build connections there. And so with 350 Vancouver, that's one option, but there are so many groups that are doing great things. And another thing I would advocate for is thinking about climate change in the election. The decisions that we make this fall will have a huge impact on whether we're able to bring about a Green New Deal. And so thinking about that at the ballot box is also really important.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for coming on our show today. And thank you for joining us on Access TV. Please remember to like us. And if you have any comments, please put them down there below. And if you can, follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well.